Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again to discuss a development that's rattling the corridors of global power: Russia's recent arms deal with Yemen. When the news broke that Moscow would be supplying Sukhoi fighter jets to the Yemeni government, the shockwaves rippled far beyond the Middle East. Western capitals, already tense over Ukraine, sanctions, and the shifting global order, suddenly found themselves staring at a new geopolitical chess move, one that could redefine alliances and power balances in the region. When news broke that Russia had finalized an arms deal to supply Sukhoi fighter jets to Yemen, it sent shockwaves through global political and defense circles. For many in the West, this wasn't just another military transaction. It was a strategic earthquake, a signal that Moscow was extending its reach far beyond the battlefields of Eastern Europe and into one of the most volatile regions on the planet. The headlines captured the drama, but beneath the surface lies a deeper and more consequential shift in the global balance of power. To understand why this deal matters so much, we must look beyond the aircraft themselves. The Sukhoi series, renowned for its agility, firepower, and combat reliability, isn't just a symbol of air superiority, it's a statement of alliance, an assertion of sovereignty. For Yemen, long trapped between internal strife and external intervention, acquiring advanced Russian fighter jets is not merely about defense. It's about legitimacy and leverage. For Russia, it's a calculated move to project power, challenge Western influence, and showcase its resilience in the face of economic and diplomatic isolation. This deal comes at a time when Western powers believed Moscow's global influence was waning. After years of sanctions and diplomatic pressure following the invasion of Ukraine, many analysts predicted Russia would struggle to maintain its military export business. Yet the Sukhoi agreement with Yemen tells a different story, one of adaptation and defiance. Russia is not retreating from the world stage, it's repositioning itself. By building partnerships with nations marginalized or ignored by the West, Moscow is crafting a new network of alliances rooted not in ideology, but in mutual benefit and shared resistance to Western hegemony. The geopolitical implications are immense. The Middle East, already a theater of rivalries among global superpowers, now finds itself watching a new contender rise. The U.S. has traditionally dominated the region's arms market, supplying billions of dollars worth of weaponry to Gulf states. Russia's entry into Yemen's defense framework marks a direct intrusion into what Washington has long considered its strategic backyard. It's not just a sale, it's a statement. Russia can and will engage wherever Western dominance once seemed unshakable. Western reaction has been swift and sharp. Media outlets and political leaders have condemned the move, warning it could escalate tensions and destabilize the fragile peace efforts in Yemen. But behind the public outrage lies a layer of unease, an awareness that the old order is shifting. The monopoly of Western defense industries is being challenged, and their geopolitical leverage is eroding. The Sukhoi deal isn't just about planes, it's about prestige, influence, and the global hierarchy of power. There's also a psychological dimension to this. The image of Russian-made jets flying over Middle Eastern skies is symbolic, a visual reminder that the post-Cold War era of unipolar dominance is ending. For decades, Western nations dictated who could buy arms, who could form alliances, and who could resist. Now, Russia's engagement with Yemen underscores a new reality. Smaller nations are finding alternative patrons, and the world is no longer willing to play by Washington's rules. The timing couldn't be more strategic. As Western economies grapple with inflation, energy crises, and political fragmentation, Russia is leveraging its military-industrial complex to regain lost ground. The Sukhoi deal, therefore, is not an isolated event. It's part of a broader campaign to rewrite the geopolitical script. It's a bold declaration that, despite sanctions, isolation, and international criticism, Russia remains a global player capable of reshaping regional dynamics through economic and military cooperation. This development leaves the world watching and waiting. Will this deal mark the beginning of a new era of Russian engagement in the Middle East, or will it ignite another cycle of confrontation between Moscow and the West? One thing is certain: the Sukhoi deal has changed the tone of global diplomacy. It's not merely a contract, it's a challenge to the very architecture of Western led international order. The message from Moscow is loud and clear. Russia is not out of the game. It's rewriting the rules. The Russia-Yemen Sukhoi deal represents far more than a simple exchange of aircraft and payment. It is a calculated, high-stakes maneuver in the ever-evolving chessboard of global power. Russia's decision to arm Yemen is not a coincidence, nor is it merely an economic transaction. It is a deliberate act of geopolitical assertion, a strategic play designed to erode Western dominance in regions where the United States and its allies have long held sway. This is Moscow's message to the world. Russia is no longer content to play defense. It is moving on to offense. For decades, the Middle East has been an arena defined by Western influence, where American and European powers dictated military partnerships and controlled the flow of arms. The U.S. in particular has used weapons sales not just as business, but as diplomacy, ensuring loyalty through dependency. But with Russia stepping into the Yemeni equation, that hierarchy is being disrupted. By striking this deal, Moscow is signaling that it is prepared to challenge the West on its own turf, reshaping the political and military balance in one of the most strategically vital regions on Earth. This move is especially significant because of Yemen's position at the crossroads of the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula, a geopolitical gateway between Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Whoever influences Yemen gains a foothold near vital global trade routes and close proximity to Gulf states aligned with Washington. Russia's arms deal, therefore, is not just about empowering Yemen, it's about establishing a presence in a location that has been central to Western strategic interests for decades. It's a subtle yet powerful move in the broader game of global competition. The timing of this power play is equally crucial. The West, particularly the United States, is currently stretched thin, managing tensions in Eastern Europe, the Pacific, and the Middle East simultaneously. Russia, under intense economic pressure from sanctions, understands that the West's capacity for unified response is waning. By arming Yemen, Moscow exposes the fragility of Western influence and tests the limits of its diplomatic endurance. The deal sends a clear message. While the West isolates Russia, Russia is building new bridges, ones that could later become corridors of resistance to Western economic and political control. In the halls of power across Washington, London, and Brussels, the reaction has been alarm and disbelief. How could Moscow, under such financial strain, manage to strike such a deal? The answer lies in Russia's ability to adapt its strategy. Rather than relying on traditional allies or global institutions dominated by the West, Moscow has pivoted toward nations seeking autonomy from Western oversight. These emerging partnerships are built not on ideology, but on shared defiance, a mutual understanding that the global order, as it currently stands, is imbalanced and ripe for change. What makes this development even more compelling is how it exposes the double standards of Western foreign policy. For years, Western powers have armed states across the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel, without hesitation. Yet when Russia enters the same market, it is condemned as destabilizing, and aggressive. This selective outrage is not about peace or stability, it is about control. The West's outrage stems from fear that its monopoly on power and influence is slipping through its fingers. Russia's strategy, therefore, is as much psychological as it is political. Every Sukhoi jet delivered to Yemen represents not just a piece of military hardware, but a symbol of defiance against the West's dominance. It's a bold reminder that the global order is shifting, that power is no longer concentrated in one corner of the world. As Moscow strengthens its hand in regions once considered off limits, it forces the world to confront a new reality. The unipolar era is fading, and a new multipolar world driven by rivalry, pragmatism, and resistance is rapidly emerging. In essence, this deal is not about Yemen alone, it's about the future of global power. By moving decisively where the West least expected, Russia has shown that it's not just surviving isolation, it's turning it into opportunity. Every move in this game carries weight, and with the Sukhoi deal, Moscow has played one of its boldest cards yet, a move that challenges the very structure of Western influence and redefines the boundaries of global politics. The uproar in Western capitals over Russia's decision to arm Yemen with Sukhoi fighter jets has been loud, emotional, and above all, deeply hypocritical. Western leaders and media outlets have rushed to portray the move as an act of reckless aggression, a threat to global stability, and a violation of international norms. But beneath the outrage lies an uncomfortable truth. This condemnation rings hollow when it comes from nations that have built their own empires and their economies on the sale and export of weapons to volatile regions. The very countries crying foul today have for decades profited from the same machinery of war they now denounce. It is a familiar script. When the West sells arms, it is framed as defense cooperation, strategic partnership, or support for democracy. When Russia or any non-Western power does the same, it is immediately labeled as provocation, destabilization, or aggression. This selective moral lens reveals not genuine concern for peace, but a struggle to maintain control over a global system that has long served Western interests. It's not the weapons that outrage the West, it's the shifting balance of who gets to sell them. For decades, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France have dominated the global arms market, supplying weapons to governments across the Middle East, including some with troubling human rights records. Billions of dollars worth of advanced weaponry have flowed to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, countries whose involvement in regional conflicts, including Yemen's own devastating civil war, has been widely documented. Yet these deals rarely provoke moral outrage in Washington or Brussels. Instead, they are celebrated as triumphs of diplomacy, job creation, and mutual security. When Russia steps into the same arena, however, the narrative shifts from cooperation to confrontation. This double standard exposes the deeper hypocrisy embedded in Western foreign policy. The issue isn't about preventing war or ensuring stability, it's about preserving dominance. Arms exports have always been instruments of influence, a means to tie nations into economic and political dependency. By arming Yemen, Russia challenges that structure, offering an alternative to Western oversight. It is this challenge, not the weapons themselves, that the West finds intolerable. Moscow's deal is disruptive not because it destabilizes Yemen, but because it destabilizes Western control. What makes the outrage even more ironic is that the West's own arms deals have fueled many of the very conflicts it claims to condemn. The war in Yemen itself, where Western-supplied weapons have been used by coalition forces for years, stands as a glaring example. Civilians have paid the price, yet the flow of weapons continued, justified under the banner of strategic interests. Now, when Russia supplies arms to the same region, suddenly the moral compass swings into action. It's not morality, it's market protection dressed as virtue. This pattern is not new, but it is becoming harder to conceal in an age of global transparency. The world is watching, and many nations are beginning to question why Western outrage only surfaces when their monopoly on influence is challenged. The Sukhoi deal lays bare this contradiction. It reveals a West that preaches peace while profiting from war, that condemns others for the very behaviors it has institutionalized as foreign policy. Russia, of course, is not acting out of altruism, but neither are those now pointing fingers. The difference is that Moscow no longer seeks Western approval, it seeks autonomy. And in a world where nations are increasingly weary of being lectured by those who arm their own allies with impunity, that message resonates. The West's outrage may dominate headlines, but the deeper story is one of exposure, the unveiling of a system built on selective morality and economic self-interest. In the end, the loudest voices condemning Russia's actions are often those with the most to lose if the global order shifts, and the most to hide behind the veil of their own righteous indignation. Behind every conflict, every arms deal, and every political alliance, there lies a fundamental truth often ignored in public debate. War is business, and business is booming. The Russia-Yemen Sukhoi deal is not merely a geopolitical maneuver. It is a vivid reminder of the global economy's deep entanglement with militarization. When Moscow decided to supply Yemen with advanced fighter jets, it didn't just alter the strategic balance of the Middle East. It reignited a conversation about how profoundly the machinery of capitalism thrives on the machinery of war. The outrage, the headlines, the sanctions all mask the same underlying reality. The economics of conflict remains one of the most profitable industries in the world. The global arms trade, worth well over $500 billion annually, is not driven by security or defense alone. It is sustained by demand, competition, and profit margins. Every Sukhoi jet, every missile system, and every drone represents not only power, but also an economic transaction, a product designed, manufactured, and marketed within a capitalist framework. For Russia, facing sanctions and economic pressure, arms sales are a lifeline. For Western defense contractors, they are a goldmine. The West condemns Moscow for arming Yemen, but the same nations are home to defense giants like Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, and Raytheon, companies that make billions selling weapons to governments worldwide, often in regions plagued by instability. The hypocrisy is not just political, it is financial. At the heart of this global arms economy lies a paradox. Peace may be good for humanity, but it is bad for business. The more the world burns, the more money there is to be made. Governments justify these deals under the pretext of security and strategic balance, but behind the rhetoric are factories, contracts, and shareholders demanding returns. This cycle of production and destruction keeps economies running. When one market dries up, new conflicts or new fears must be manufactured. The result is a system where war is not an unfortunate consequence of politics, but a structural necessity for economic survival. Russia understands this logic all too well. With traditional markets restricted by Western sanctions, Moscow has turned its military-industrial complex into an instrument of foreign policy and economic endurance. The Sukhoi deal with Yemen is a calculated effort to maintain economic momentum while expanding geopolitical reach. Every aircraft sold strengthens not only Russia's defense sector, but also its financial resilience. It sends a clear message: In a global system built on profit, morality is negotiable, but economic survival is not. Meanwhile, Western outrage over this deal conveniently ignores the same economic forces at work within their own borders. Defense spending in the United States alone exceeds $800 billion a year, an amount justified by the same fear based narratives that keep voters compliant and investors satisfied. The line between national defense and corporate profit has long blurred. Politicians campaign on peace, yet their economies depend on perpetual preparation for war. The result is a global network of mutual dependency where nations condemn conflict while simultaneously cashing in on it. The true tragedy, however, lies not in the deals themselves, but in their consequences. For every profit report filed by a defense company, there are lives shattered on the ground, families displaced, cities destroyed, futures erased. The economics of war is efficient in generating wealth, but catastrophic in human cost. Yet, as long as profits rise and markets remain stable, these costs are treated as collateral damage rather than moral failure. The Sukhoi deal, therefore, is not an anomaly. It is a mirror reflecting the world's collective complicity. It exposes a truth that many prefer to ignore, that beneath the language of diplomacy and the illusion of morality, war remains one of capitalism's most enduring engines. And until the global economy finds a way to profit from peace as much as it does from conflict, deals like Russia's with Yemen will continue to define the rhythm of international politics, one transaction, one weapon, and one profit margin at a time. Yemen has long been more than a country on the map. It has been a crossroads of empires, a gateway between continents, and tragically, a battlefield for ambitions far greater than its own. The recent Russia-Yemen Sukhoi deal throws the nation once again into the spotlight, not as a sovereign actor shaping its destiny, but as a pawn caught in the relentless tug of war between global powers. For decades, Yemen's people have paid the price for being positioned at the intersection of geography, ideology, and economics. Now, with Russia's new military partnership, the country stands at the edge of yet another transformation, one that could either reclaim its autonomy or deepen its entrapment in the global struggle for dominance. The deal, on the surface, appears to be a straightforward defense agreement. Russia supplies advanced Sukhoi fighter jets, and Yemen gains the means to protect its airspace and assert military strength. But beneath that transaction lies a web of motives and consequences that reach far beyond the skies of the Arabian Peninsula. Russia's move is a strategic push into a region long dominated by Western influence. But for Yemen, it is a gamble, an attempt to gain leverage in a world that has repeatedly used its soil as a stage for proxy wars. The irony is unmistakable. In trying to strengthen its sovereignty, Yemen may have once again invited foreign power into the heart of its politics. For years, Yemen has been ravaged by internal conflict and external interference. The war between the Houthis and the Saudi-led coalition has devastated the nation, leaving millions displaced, infrastructure destroyed, and the economy shattered. International actors, including Western and regional powers, have treated Yemen less as a nation in need of rebuilding and more as a geopolitical chessboard to be managed. Each new alliance, each foreign intervention has been justified in the name of stability, yet the outcome has been anything but. Into this fragile context, Russia steps in, not as a humanitarian ally, but as a power-seeking opportunity amid chaos. What makes Yemen particularly significant is its geography. Sitting along the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, Yemen holds immense strategic value. Control over this passage means influence over a major artery of global trade and oil transport. The West has long understood this. Now, Russia does too. By deepening its ties with Yemen, Moscow positions itself closer to one of the most sensitive logistical routes on the planet, a move that has far reaching implications not just for the Middle East, but for global trade and energy security. In this sense, Yemen's struggle for independence has become inseparable from the ambitions of superpowers seeking access and influence. For the people of Yemen, this global power play has come at a devastating cost. Years of bombardment, famine, and political instability have left the country's population exhausted and disillusioned. Yet the promises continue, the promise of protection, investment, reconstruction, always tied to foreign agendas. The arrival of Russian arms may offer short-term security for some factions, but it also risks reigniting tensions, drawing Yemen deeper into the rivalries between Moscow, Washington, and Riyadh. Once again, Yemen's sovereignty becomes conditional, a currency traded between stronger players. And so Yemen remains trapped in a loop that seems impossible to escape. Foreign powers intervene in the name of peace, yet profit from the persistence of conflict. Every new alliance is presented as a turning point, yet each one reinforces dependence rather than liberation. The Sukhoi deal might give Yemen the tools to defend its skies, but it also binds the nation more tightly to a global system in which power is transactional and loyalty is temporary. For Russia, it's a strategic foothold. For the West, it's a provocation. But for Yemen, it is another reminder of its painful position, too valuable to ignore, yet too weak to stand alone. As the world debates the implications of Russia's latest move, Yemen's reality remains unchanged. A nation caught between competing empires, struggling to reclaim its agency in a world that profits from its vulnerability. Every promise of power comes with a price. And for Yemen, that price has always been paid in blood, in hunger, and in the loss of self-determination. The Sukhoi jets may roar across Yemeni skies as symbols of strength, but beneath that thunder lies a quieter truth. Yemen is still not free from the grip of the global power games that have defined its fate for generations. The Russia-Yemen Sukhoi deal has reignited an uncomfortable yet essential debate about the world's economic and political trajectory. At its core, it reflects a deeper systemic problem, the way global power continues to be defined and sustained through militarization and profit. Every major power, whether in the East or West, still measures its influence not by how many lives it uplifts, but by how much military strength it can project and how many markets it can dominate. The time has come to question whether humanity can continue to survive under a system that treats war as business, conflict as strategy, and peace as an afterthought. The global order built on militarized capitalism is collapsing under its contradictions, and the world urgently needs a new framework, one that prioritizes cooperation over coercion, human welfare over wealth accumulation, and shared stability over strategic dominance. The current world system operates like an economic machine powered by insecurity. Fear and conflict are not accidents. They are features that sustain the engines of profit. Nations pour trillions into defense budgets, corporations thrive on arms sales, and politicians justify it all in the name of national security. Yet the result is a world less secure than ever before. From Yemen to Ukraine, from Gaza to the South China Sea, militarization has become the universal language of policy. The Sukhoi deal between Russia and Yemen is not an isolated event. It is a symptom of a global addiction to military capitalism, where weapons are currency and peace is a public relations slogan. This is the world that Prof. Richard Wolff often warns about, a capitalist system so entrenched in militarization that it cannot imagine stability without conflict. Every major economy depends on its defense sector for growth, jobs, and political leverage. Even nations that call for peace continue to arm themselves and their allies, preparing for wars they claim to want to avoid. The West accuses Russia of aggression, Russia accuses the West of hypocrisy, and both sides continue to feed the same cycle of fear and consumption. The arms industry doesn't care who wins, its only victory is the continuation of demand. The tragedy is that this system has normalized destruction as a necessary cost of progress. But history shows that no empire, no system built on endless conflict can sustain itself forever. The growing economic divides, social unrest, and environmental crises all point toward an unavoidable truth. The militarized capitalist order is unsustainable. Its beneficiaries are few, its victims are many, and its foundation, constant growth through competition, cannot coexist with global survival. What the Russia Yemen deal truly exposes is not just the power struggle between East and West, but the moral bankruptcy of a world where sovereignty is traded like a commodity and peace is priced higher than war. A new global order must begin with a radical rethinking of what defines power. True strength in the modern era cannot be measured by missiles or markets, but by a nation's ability to foster equity, sustainability, and cooperation. It requires dismantling the economic incentives that reward war and rebuilding international systems that prioritize collective development. The United Nations, international trade institutions, and financial systems all must evolve beyond their Cold War era structures that still privilege militarized economies. The world needs a system where diplomacy, not defense budgets, drives global priorities. The Russia-Yemen deal should not only alarm us, it should awaken us. It shows how far the world has drifted from the idea of peace as progress and how deeply profit has infected our politics. The lesson is not that Russia is wrong and the West is right, or vice versa. It is that both operate within a global system designed to perpetuate rivalry for economic gain. Until that structure is confronted and transformed, nations will continue to arm themselves into ruin. The future depends on breaking this cycle, on constructing a world order where cooperation replaces competition, where wealth is measured in well-being, and where the measure of progress is not how efficiently we destroy, but how courageously we build.